I was carrying his child when he cheated on me. He thought he could beg for forgiveness and we'd just go back to normal. But what came next shattered his life far worse than he ever shattered mine. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a single finger. Karma did it for me. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your whole heart, then you know how deep the wound can cut. But you also know revenge or karma can be the sweetest medicine. Subscribe right now so you don't miss stories where justice hits harder than any punch. Like this video if you've ever dreamed of watching someone get exactly what they deserve. Let's dive in. I was 19, maybe 20, young enough to still think love was the answer to everything, but old enough to have already had my heart broken once. I'd just gotten out of a nearly 5-year relationship with my high school boyfriend. It had taken everything in me to end it, the comfort, the shared history, the fear of being alone, but I knew it was the right decision. And now, with that chapter closed, I found myself thinking about someone I'd never truly gotten over. Someone from way back in junior high. Let's call him DN, short for Duckenozzle, a nickname that would only become more appropriate with time. DN had been my secret for years. The kind of secret that wasn't just a silly teenage crush, but a slow-burning torch I carried from the moment I met him. We'd been friends all through school. The kind of friends who joke and hang out, but never quite cross that line into something more. Well, except for that one time. Our first year of school together, we kissed. It was quick, almost innocent, but for me, it was lightning in a bottle. I wanted more, but I never pushed. I figured if he wanted me, he'd make the move. He never did. So I locked my feelings away. I never told him, never even hinted. Only my closest friend knew. And life went on. Fast forward 7 years. I'd moved from Alaska to the Pacific Northwest, convinced I'd never go back. DN was still up there living his life, and I thought, why not just tell him? Just get it off my chest. I expected rejection. At most, an awkward conversation that might make our friendship a little weird. But I needed to say it out loud, so I could finally move on. What I didn't expect was for him to say it back. His voice was almost trembling when he told me, I always had a thing for you. I just never knew how to approach you. I was terrified you'd reject me. It was surreal. After all those years of keeping my feelings buried, here was the boy I dreamed about, telling me he'd felt the same way all along. And suddenly my never going back to Alaska rule didn't feel so set in stone anymore. Because of a family perk, a relative who was a pilot, I could fly standby for cheap. So I started visiting Alaska every couple of weeks. Every time I went back, our friends would light up. You and DN. Finally. We always hoped you'd end up together. It was cheesy, but God, it felt good. It was exactly the life I'd imagined for myself at 14. My friends rooting for us, DN by my side, no drama, no gossip. I'd even avoided dating anyone from our school back in the day just to steer clear of that mess. Several months of these visits later, DN proposed. And I said yes. Without hesitation. I started making plans to move back. I boxed up my entire life into parcel shipments, not much, since I was still young and didn't have furniture, and arranged to live with him at his place. He had a roommate, a guy I'll call BM, Bicycle Man. He's important to this story later, but for now, he was just the guy DN shared rent with. Everything was falling into place. Until the last week before my move. I started feeling off. Not just tired, but heavy. My body felt different, and deep down, I already knew. I bought a pregnancy test. Positive. My hands were shaking as I stared at those lines. I was overjoyed, scared, sure, but happy. This was going to be the next chapter of our life together. So that evening, I called DN to tell him. I could hear noise in the background, a party. Before I could even share my news, he jumped in. I have to tell you about this really cool artist chick who showed up tonight. He went on and on about her, how interesting she was, how talented. I felt my stomach tighten. My instincts were screaming. This wasn't the moment for my big reveal. Don't do anything you'll regret, I told him. He told me to call back later, so I could tell him my news. I did. Hours later, someone else picked up and said DN couldn't come to the phone. My stomach dropped. I knew. The next morning I called again. No answer. All day. By evening, I finally got him. "I have to tell you something," he said. And just like that, I was nauseous. He admitted it. He'd slept with the cool artist chick, T Choti, as I'll call her, the same night I was calling to tell him he was going to be a father. I hung up. I threw up. And the worst part? He didn't even ask what my news was. Later, I called him back to rip into him. He begged for forgiveness. Said it was a mistake, that he still wanted me to move to Alaska. As if one night of betrayal could be erased with a few "I'm sorry, yes." When someone breaks you like that, they're not just killing the love. They're awakening a part of you that will never, ever let them get away with it. And DN had no idea what was coming. I wish I could say I told DN to shove his apology where the sun doesn't shine. I wish I could say I slammed the door on that relationship and never looked back. But I was young. I was in love. And I was pregnant. Against every screaming instinct in my gut, I decided to go ahead with the move. I told myself, people make mistakes. If he's truly sorry, maybe we can rebuild. But somewhere deep inside, the foundation of trust was already shattered. When I landed in Anchorage, DN was there to pick me up. He smiled like nothing had happened, like we were still the fairy tale couple everyone cheered for. But when he hugged me, it felt different, stiffer. And then there was BM, Bicycle Man. BM wasn't the kind of guy you'd immediately peg as important to your life story. Mid-20s, scruffy, always had a bike leaning against something in the house. But he had this uncanny ability to read a room. From the first moment we met, I could tell he sensed the tension between DN and me. We tried to settle into life together. But normal had been replaced by something far uglier. DN was distracted all the time. When I'd ask him about his day, he'd answer with half-interest, scrolling through his phone or fiddling with his guitar. Some nights he'd come home late. Too late. He'd claim he was just hanging with friends, but he'd smell faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. And every time it happened, I'd feel that same nausea I'd felt the night he cheated. BM never came right out and said anything. But every now and then, he'd drop these little comments. "DN sure's been busy lately, huh?" he'd say, smirking. Or, "If you ever need a ride somewhere, you can call me." No questions asked. I didn't know what to make of it at first. Was he hinting at something? Or just poking at the obvious? It didn't take long for DN to slip again. One night, I called him, no answer. I tried again an hour later, still nothing. Finally, just past midnight, he picked up. His voice was low, almost like he was whispering. "Hey, I'm out. I'll be home soon." But soon turned into 3 a.m. He smelled like beer, and that same damn perfume. After that, I stopped pretending. I wasn't his doting fiancé anymore. I went quiet, detached. And I think that scared him, not enough to stop cheating, but enough to notice I was slipping away. He'd try to overcompensate, bring home flowers, cook dinner. But it all felt hollow, because every kind gesture was sitting on top of a pile of lies. One afternoon, while DN was at work, BM and I ended up sitting in the living room together. He'd just come in from a ride, hair messy, cheeks red from the cold. "You know he's not going to change, right?" he said out of nowhere. I froze. He looked me dead in the eyes. "I've seen him with other girls. Not just that artist chick. More than once." The words hit me like a punch. Even though I'd suspected, hearing it confirmed from someone living under the same roof made it real. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, numb. And BM leaned back, watching me like he was waiting to see what I'd do with the information. Something shifted in me that day. I stopped thinking about fixing the relationship. I stopped trying to get him to see my worth. Instead, I started watching, waiting. Because here's the thing, you don't always have to go out of your way to destroy someone who's wronged you. Sometimes you just have to give them enough rope. We talked about throwing a small engagement party now that I was in Alaska, but DN kept dragging his feet. Finally, he said he didn't want to make a big deal about it. Translation: he didn't want other women knowing he was engaged. I didn't argue. I just let him think he'd gotten away with being clever.
"But BM?"
He noticed. "No party? That's interesting," he said one night when DN wasn't home. I gave him the faintest smile. "Oh, there's gonna be a party." He just doesn't know it yet. By now, we were sleeping in the same bed, but living entirely separate lives. I'd go for long walks alone, visit old friends. And the less I was home, the more DN seemed to spiral, as if he could sense that control slipping away from him. He started accusing me of being distant, of not trying in the relationship. The irony was enough to make me laugh out loud sometimes. And then the thing happened, the spark that would light the fuse. It started with BM coming into the kitchen one morning, holding a piece of paper he'd found on the counter. "You might want to see this," he said. It was a handwritten note. From THOT, the same girl from the party. The one he'd cheated with while I was calling to tell him about the baby. The note was short, just a few flirty lines, ending with "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing." My hands didn't shake this time. My stomach didn't drop. I just smiled. Because now, DN wasn't just a cheating fiancé. He was an openly sloppy cheating fiancé. And sloppy cheaters? They're the easiest to take down. From that moment forward, I stopped seeing myself as the heartbroken victim. Now, I was the executioner, and DN had just handed me the blade. When DN got home that evening, I was in the kitchen cooking dinner. He kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong. I smiled back, the same smile I'd worn the night I said yes to his proposal. But this time, it wasn't love behind it. It was calculation. He didn't notice the difference. Cheaters rarely do. Later that night, after DN went to bed, BM knocked softly on my bedroom door. "So, I'm guessing you saw the note." I nodded. He leaned against the doorframe. "You know, I'm not a fan of DN. Never have been. But watching how he treats you? Yeah, it's worse than I thought." Something in his tone told me he wasn't just making conversation. "You thinking of leaving?" he asked. "Eventually," I said. "But not yet." He raised an eyebrow. "Not yet." I shrugged. "Let's just say, I'm gonna let him dig his own grave a little deeper." BM smirked. "Fair enough. Just let me know if you ever need someone to hand him a shovel." And just like that, BM became an ally. Over the next couple of weeks, DN seemed relaxed. Too relaxed. He probably thought I'd gotten over the cheating. He'd stop home for quick showers before heading out again, tossing vague excuses about band practice or helping a friend move. One night, he came home smelling like beer and perfume again. I didn't say a word. I just looked him in the eyes, smiled, and asked, "Did you have fun?" He froze for a moment, clearly unsure if it was a trap. Yeah. Just with the guys." I nodded and went back to folding laundry. That's the thing about silence. It makes them more nervous than yelling ever could. A few nights later, BM caught me in the hallway. "You're gonna love this," he whispered, pulling out his phone. He'd taken a picture of DN at a bar kissing THOT. It was blurry, but unmistakable. DN's hands were on her waist, her arms wrapped around his neck. BM grinned. "Thought you might want proof that's not just hearsay." I didn't even have to ask why he'd done it. BM hated DN's guts, and now he had the perfect excuse to help me dismantle him. Here's the part DN didn't know. When I moved back to Alaska, I'd sold some things from my old apartment. Furniture, electronics, even some jewelry from my previous relationship. I'd put the money in a separate savings account. DN thought I was broke. He thought I needed him to survive. That was his first mistake. Because being underestimated? That's the sharpest weapon you can have. One Friday night, DN decided to confess again, probably because he was feeling guilty for whatever he'd done that week. We were sitting on the couch and he said, "You know, I made mistakes, but I want us to work. You're the one I see a future with." I just looked at him, nodding as if I believed him. Inside, I was thinking, keep talking. Every word is just another piece of rope. Then he said it. The sentence that took my plan from vague ideas to an exact, detailed execution. "I've cut things off with her. You have nothing to worry about." Except I knew he hadn't. BM had literally seen them together 2 days before. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to leave him. I was going to leave him in the most inconvenient, humiliating way possible. Step 1. Make him think everything's fine. Smile, cook dinner, even initiate small talk. The calmer I seemed, the more blindsided he'd be. Step 2. Quietly pack the things that actually mattered to me, important documents, sentimental items, valuables, and store them at a friend's place. Step 3. Time my exit for when he needed me the most. The opportunity presented itself 2 weeks later. Dean was gearing up for a big local music gig. This was his moment, the one night he'd been bragging about for months. He was counting on me to be there, to smile in the crowd, to play the role of the supportive fiancé. Which is exactly why I decided that night would be my curtain call. I told BM my plan, half expecting him to say I was being dramatic. Instead, he lit up like it was Christmas morning. "Oh, this is going to be fun," he said. He offered to give me a ride out of there after Dean left for the gig. He also promised to keep Dean busy after the show so I could have a few hours head start. And just like that, the countdown began. The night before the gig, I cooked Dean his favorite dinner. I laughed at his jokes, asked about his set list, even kissed him goodnight. And the whole time, I was picturing his face when he came home to an empty apartment. Because sometimes, revenge isn't about yelling or breaking things or making a scene. Sometimes, it's about absence. The sudden, gaping hole where you used to be, leaving them to explain to everyone why the person who loved them walked out without a word. And Dean? He was about to learn exactly how that felt. This is where the execution night plays out. Dean's world begins to collapse, and karma makes its first big entrance. The day of Dean's big gig, I woke up early. My heart was steady. No nerves, no second-guessing. Just focus. While he fussed over his guitar and his outfit, I made him breakfast. He kissed my forehead before leaving for sound check, saying, "I'll see you tonight, babe. You're gonna love the show." "I'm sure I will," I replied, my voice sweet as honey. As soon as the door closed, I got to work. I'd already moved out most of my valuables to a friend's place. Now I went through the rest, clothes, toiletries, the few kitchen items I'd bought. Into boxes they went, neat and organized, because messy exits give people excuses to make it about the drama instead of the betrayal. BM showed up around noon with his truck. "Ready?" he asked. "More than ready." Together, we loaded everything into his truck bed. He tossed me a look halfway through and said, "You know he's going to completely lose it." I smiled. Good. Before I left, I put one thing in the center of the kitchen table, an envelope with his name on it. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper. It read, "You cheated while I was carrying your child. You lied to my face, over and over. I deserve better, and I found it in walking away from you. Don't call me. Don't look for me. You made your choice, and I'm finally making mine. No signature. No love. Just finality." BM drove me to my friend's place on the other side of town. I left my things there and stayed put. No phone calls. No texts. Meanwhile, Dean was out basking in the attention at his gig, clueless that his home life was disintegrating behind him. Around 11 p.m., my phone started blowing up.
Dean.
Over and over. First, the casual. "Hey, where are you? The show's over." Then the confused. "Babe? You at home?" Then the frantic. "What the hell is going on? Where is all your stuff?" I didn't respond to a single one. BM texted me separately. He's freaking out. Didn't even stay for the after party. Left in the middle of packing up his gear. When Dean got home, he found the apartment nearly empty and my note on the table. From what BM later told me, Dean's face went pale. He just stood there, staring at the paper for a solid minute, like maybe if he read it enough times, it would change into something else. And then, right on cue, he tried to call me again. When I still didn't answer, he threw his phone at the wall. BM said it shattered. I woke up to a barrage of voicemails. Some were angry. "You can't just walk out on me like this." Some were desperate. "We can work this out. I'll change, I swear." Some were pitiful. "Please, I can't lose you. You're the only one who's ever been there for me." Every single one went unheard. Delete, delete, delete. You might think the story ends there, but no. Dean had been sowing seeds of his own destruction for months, and now they were sprouting all at once. Within a week of me leaving, THOT found out about the pregnancy. Not from me, but from mutual friends. Apparently, Deanne had told her I was just an ex who wouldn't move on. She dumped him immediately. And not quietly. She told everyone in their circle what he'd done, how he cheated on his pregnant fiancé with her, and then lied about it. In a small town like ours, word travels fast. Suddenly, Deanne wasn't the cool musician with a mysterious romantic life. He was the sleazy guy who couldn't keep his hands, or lies, to himself. Friends started ghosting him. Invitations dried up. Even his bandmates were reevaluating things, which was a polite way of saying they didn't want to be associated with his mess. BM told me that one night, about 3 weeks after I'd left, Deanne came home drunk and slumped on the couch. He muttered something about how everything was perfect until she left. BM didn't even look up from his beer. He just said, "Nah. Everything was perfect until you screwed it up." Deanne didn't reply. He just sat there, staring at the floor. I never spoke to him again. I never needed to. Because the thing about karma is it doesn't need an audience. It works whether you're watching or not. And Deanne? He was living proof. The thing about walking away without a fight is that it leaves the other person with nowhere to put their anger. If you scream and cry, they can convince themselves you're emotional or crazy. If you argue, they can latch onto your words and twist them into an excuse. But silence? Silence forces them to sit in their own mess. And from what BM told me, Deanne hated it. Within a month of me leaving, Deanne's music gig prospects dried up completely. His band split after the lead guitarist refused to keep playing with a guy who's always making the group look bad. The money he'd been making from side jobs was inconsistent, and without my income contributing to rent, he was falling behind on bills. BM, for all his loyalty to me, wasn't going to cover Deanne's half of the rent. When Deanne started missing payments, BM gave him notice to move out. And the most poetic part? BM didn't just kick him out. He timed it so Deanne had to be out by the same weekend Thought's new boyfriend was moving into her apartment, meaning Deanne had to watch her parade her new, stable, non-cheating partner around town while he was hauling his stuff into a dingy sublet. By then, Deanne's reputation was completely torched. Friends he'd known for years didn't return his calls. The local bar owners, who used to welcome him to play gigs, didn't want the drama of him showing up. Even the women who might have entertained his flirty antics now gave him that "you're disgusting" look when he tried. It's worth noting, I chose not to keep the pregnancy. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but it was mine to make. I knew I didn't want to raise a child with someone like Deanne in the picture. I also knew that if I went through with it, he'd use that child as leverage to keep himself tethered to my life. That knowledge made me even more certain that walking away, entirely, was the right choice. About 6 months after I left, BM called me out of the blue. "Just thought you'd like to know. Deanne's living with some random guy he met at a bar. Working part-time at a convenience store. Still whining to anyone who'll listen about how you overreacted." I laughed. Not because I found his situation funny in a petty way, but because it was so poetic. This man had once convinced me he was the love of my life. That he'd been waiting for me for 7 years. That I was the one. And yet, in less than a year, he'd gone from being my fiancé to being the town cautionary tale. My revenge didn't come from screaming at him, keying his car, or trying to ruin him. It came from knowing the one thing he valued most, his image. Deanne lived for the way people saw him. The charming, talented guy who everyone rooted for. When I left without a fight, without drama, and with the truth quietly spreading behind me, I took that image away. And the beauty of it was, I didn't even have to tell people what he did. THOT did that for me. BM did that for me. His own arrogance did that for me. Here's the thing about betrayal. It's not just about the act. It's about what it reveals. When Deanne cheated, it wasn't just that he'd slept with someone else. It was that he could look me in the eye, while I was carrying his child, and still choose his own ego over my trust. That kind of person will always find a way to ruin themselves. All I had to do was get out of the way. Every once in a while, I'd hear about Deanne through mutual friends. The last I heard, he'd moved out of state, chasing some vague promise of a fresh start. But you can't outrun who you are. And if he's still the same person he was when I left, I have no doubt he's repeating the same pattern somewhere else. Meanwhile, I built a life I'm proud of. I have people around me who value me, respect me, and wouldn't dream of throwing it away for a few cheap thrills. And that, more than anything, is the real revenge. Some people think revenge has to be loud. But the truth? Sometimes the quietest exits are the deadliest. Because when you take yourself, your love, your presence, your support, out of someone's life, you're not just leaving. You're making them face the wreckage they built all alone. What's the most satisfying revenge or karma you've ever seen play out? Tell me in the comments. I love reading those stories. And if you enjoyed watching justice unfold here, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share this with someone who could use a reminder. The best revenge is living a life they can't be part of.